Hey, hi everybody. Kris Quinones here from Rasayana. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, yoga specialist, body worker, and healer, natural healer of chronic pain, of immobility, of injury recovery. I've been studying and practicing these holistic systems of yoga and Ayurveda now for over 20 years. And I work as a licensed muscular therapist, treating people who are wanting to extend their vitality well into their 80s and beyond. And today we're going to be sharing and talking a bit about low back pain. What are some of the contributing factors to it, how people struggle with it, and what we can do about it using natural methods, using these holistic systems from yoga and Ayurveda, as well as integrating some self massage techniques using some massage balls. Now, if you did not get the links earlier on which massage balls to purchase, you can certainly substitute tennis balls in the meantime. Two of them into a long tube sock, tie off the end with an elastic or a knot, and that should suffice. In the meantime, or until you can get what I use and recommend, which is what I'll be using today, which is yoga tune-up balls. They come in this mesh tote here and are made out of a rubber substance or just rubber. Now, these are not hollow balls. These are pretty dense, and so they're quite firm and allow for a good grip and manipulation of the soft tissue as we'll be working with tonight. So you can use these balls both as a pair in the tote, as we'll use them tonight. You can also take a ball out if you're working on a particular section or area of the body, and that is more doable. So this is the yoga tune-up balls. And she also has another set called the alpha balls. These are a bit larger in size. These are probably about the size of a softball, I would estimate. And I like these for working different areas of my body that sometimes need that modification. Now, some of the rolling that we do might be a little tender or painful in some areas. If it's too painful for you, my recommendations are to move up in the size of the ball that you're using, to put a folded blanket or towel over the ball to help add some softening and some padding to the technique. Or you can stand and lean your weight against a wall with the ball between the wall and your body. And that's a nice modification so that you can continue these exercises safely. Now, we don't want to be rolling anywhere in the body where there is a history of osteoporosis, osteopenia, an old fracture that perhaps did not heal very well or correctly. And we want to avoid rolling over any major blood vessel. You'll know if you're on a blood vessel because you'll feel that thumping of the blood pumping through that vessel if you are in fact putting compression on it. So these are the times and places and circumstances that we do not want to be putting our body weight and gravity and force onto bones and tissues that could potentially be further injured. If you have any questions about that, check with your doctor and be sure that you've gotten the okay to go ahead. So, low back pain is such an epidemic right now and has been for quite some time. It is accounted for 40% of all adult pain that is reported in the United States is low back pain. It's the number one reason for urgent care visits and emergency room visits, non-life threatening emergency room visits. Low back pain is the number one cause for the visit. And we quite simply out have been outliving our spines. There's an old Ayurvedic proverb that goes along the lines of, You're only as old as your spine. And it's pretty interesting because as we age and tissues naturally dry out, then the bone density and quality of those tissues goes down. And we're going to be talking about some of the habits and lifestyle practices of the yogis that I teach and coach groups of women every year through a transformative process in these habits of the yogis, self healing habits, so that we can slow down the natural aging process and the drying out of those tissues and keep them fluid, hydrated, lubricated, and mobile and pain free. And pain free. So, when we talk about low back pain, there are so many contributing factors to it. Let's do a little bit of anatomy review with my buddy Flacco over here. Um, you'll see that naturally there are some curves to our spine. We have a natural curve down here, the lumbar spine and the low back, and then again up further in the cervical spine, just behind the neck. And so, what often happens with low back pain is a biomechanical problem. Either we have a strain or sprain on a muscle or joint, or the quality of our connective tissue of the fascia is poor, either due to your standard American diet, overeating, or not digesting well, can create really stiff and rigid connective tissue. And as a result, it can limit your range of motion and pull on different parts of the body. This connective tissue of fascia encompasses every piece of anatomy in your body, your muscles, your tendons and ligaments, your bones, your visceral organs. It's everywhere. It's a three-dimensional web that now modern science is becoming much more knowledgeable about in its role with immunity and with our capacity to maintain our health and vitality. And so, when that fascia is a poor quality because of our lifestyle choices and habits and diet and stress management, it can pull. It can pull joints out of alignment and create this biomechanical error where different structures might get pinched. We often have herniated discs, which is a common low back pain diagnosis. There's spinal stenosis, where the hole or the size of the spinal column or canal gets smaller and starts to compress on nerves. We've got facet syndrome, where some of the parts of the vertebra, these smaller bones on the backs of each individual vertebra that rub up against the neighboring vertebra, that sometimes can become very arthritic and stiff, and we lose that mobility in that teeny tiny joint. And so there can be a lot of different reasons why we have this malalignment in the joints in the body, even if there's no injury per se, like a motor vehicle accident or a fall. Also, the functional strength of our muscles has a great deal to do with our risk for injury and falls and our capacity to slow down the natural wear and tear of our joints. Because weak muscles, much like poor quality fascia or connective tissue, will pull joints out of alignment. Now, really common phenomena of this that I see as a massage therapist all the time is when people come in and they have very tight quads or very tight hamstrings. Now, both of these muscle groups attach to the pelvis. They're what help keep the legs attached to the torso, to the trunk. And so let's start with the quadriceps here in front first. They attach to one of the bony landmarks here, right in front of the pelvis, where it crosses the hip joint and continues down to cross the knee joint and insert down here at the top of the shin. When the quads are very tight and this muscle becomes shorter than it typically is, what it does is it starts to pull the front of this pelvis into a tilt forward. And when the pelvis starts to lose this natural degree of rotation, then we change the natural curve in the low back here. So when the quads are really tight, it's pulling the pelvis forward. And conversely, when people have very tight hamstrings in the back, that similarly is going to tip this pelvis posteriorly and lose some of that natural curve. When we lose these curves in our spine, we lose the body's ability to absorb shock. When we're walking, skipping, jumping, running, dancing, all of those movements create a bit of shock. And so even a simple daily activity like taking a walk in the neighborhood can become quite painful for people who have poor alignment and biomechanics in the body. Other muscles that help support the core that are part of the landscape for chronic low back pain include four major abdominal muscle groups. We have our rectus femoris, which is right in the front, running up and down, attaching to the ribs and the front of the pubic bone here. We have our obliques, our internal and external obliques, which are kind of these side muscles here at an angle on both sides. We have our transverse abdominis muscle that comes horizontally across the abdomen. And so these four muscles work together to create that stability here in the core. And that's what is often lacking, quite frankly, in a lot of people with low back pain, whether or not you have an injury. And that lack of functional strength, along with a lack of flexibility and lack of flow of life force energy through the subtle channels of the body, as well as flow of lymph and plasma and blood through these tissues, which keep these tissues healthy and in communication with the entire body and every other system within it. Now, one of the things that's really tough about determining the origin of low back pain is how many things can contribute to it. I just talked about half a dozen biomechanical issues. Now, there's also, of course, the digestive contribution to low back pain, where those who have chronic constipation or trouble eliminating their bowels on a daily basis or completely within an hour upon rising tend to experience low back pain, whether there's congestion and stagnation in the pelvis. In addition to those four major abdominal muscles that make up the core, we have the iliacus muscle and the psoas muscles, which are two of the strongest hip flexors and often very much part of the biomechanical aspects of low back pain and limitations. The iliacus attaches to the inside of the pelvic bowl here, and it swirls around down the thigh and attaches to the lesser trochanter on the femur bone, the thigh bone. The psoas muscle is a little bit higher. It attaches to the transverse process of the lumbar spine here. And that comes down, it joins with the iliacus muscle and continues down and again attaches as it wraps around the femur to some of these bony landmarks. And when these muscles are very tight, we are in this contracted flexion of the hip. And this often, again, contributes to that anterior tilt of the pelvis and also creates this contraction through the energy body and the lower three chakras in the yogic system and yogic anatomy. Those lower chakras are associated with our core stability from an emotional state. Do we have our most basic needs met? Safety, these kinds of things are all associated with the lower chakras, as they are with reproduction and elimination. And so when these muscles in particular are chronically tight or injured, they often are compressing on other vessels in neighboring anatomy, whether they're blood or lymph vessels, nerves, or the subtle vessels and channels of the body that we call shrota. These are channels that carry life force energy in the body, and they carry them in very specific directions with very specific functions. We're going to talk a little bit later today about some of the energy points in Indian medicine called marma points. And I'm going to teach you where to find them and how to apply pressure and some slight massage using our tune-up balls or tennis balls on these specific energy points of the body to facilitate that flow and more nutrition and lubrication of the bone and soft tissues, as well as provide some natural pain relief that is non-pharmaceutical and effective. So, with low back pain and the many reasons contributing to the biomechanical or the psychosocial, emotional components that contribute to our experience of any pain in the body, um, are quite broad. And so, depending on your lifestyle and your capacity to cope with stress, to have healthy habits around when you rise, when you play, when you eat, and when you rest, the yogis and Ayurveda recommend very specific times of day for these daily acts of living. And we know now with modern science the importance of the circadian rhythms and these night day cycles that help express our genes and how and when our genes turn on or off and are expressed. It's no longer current. It's no longer accurate to continue believing that if you have or your family has a history of a particular genetic disposition, that you will, uh, experience that fate. So much of how our genes express and our experience to pain and vitality and mobility have to do with our capacity to manage stress. And nowadays, we're outliving our spines. Just a generation or two ago, the average American life expectancy was only like in the mid 60s, right? This was before the polio vaccine, and people were a lot sicker and quite simply just didn't live as long as we do now. Now we have vaccines, and we are, in fact, outliving our predecessors because we have the modern science to eradicate some of these diseases that shorten life expectancy. And as a result, we're feeling our bodies more. Now, the most common diagnostic measure is imaging of some kind. You will have some x rays, perhaps, or an MRI or a CAT scan to see if there's soft tissue damage and any of that biomechanical misalignment. The caveat with relying on imaging as a diagnostic measure for low back pain is that it is limited in how much information it truly provides in terms of the pathology, I'll say, in terms of when things are going awry and are not as they should be. Now, any healthy, active adult over the age of 35 will show on imaging some natural degeneration of the spine, of the tissues, of the discs. Again, this is part of the natural aging process where we have in later stages of life more air, more space elements that make up our physical bodies. And as a result, bone density decreases as we age. And so, any normal, healthy, active adult will show some natural degeneration and arthritic changes on imaging. There's also some EMG testing, some electromyography, where needles are inserted into areas of the body and a small current is put through. It doesn't sound nearly as torturous as I describe it. I've actually had this done when I had my hip injury and years of chronic sciatic pain after my surgery. And the that would determine if there's nerve damage and how much nerve damage, or if the nerves just aren't conducting as well, or maybe they are, in a lot of cases, especially with autoimmune diseases now, the nerves are actually a bit hyper aware, hyper alert, and active as part of that fight or flight state of our nervous system in so much of modern living. Which brings me to some of the habits that the yogis practice regularly that help mitigate these natural aging processes on our bones and joints. And I'm going to talk about them today. You all also should have a handout or have been emailed a PDF of a handout referring to everything I'm talking about today. And know that if you want to talk more about how Ayurveda may help you in a particular issue you might be working with, or if you're a healthy adult and want to learn how to live your life at the next level, let me know. Just hit me up on my website at www.rasa, Rasa-yana, yana.com. And you can submit a form which will contact me, and I'll get you in the pipeline for a free 45-minute Zoom session where we can talk about what your greatest concerns are and how Ayurveda or yoga could apply to it to get you to your next goals and next level of living. And some of these habits that I'm talking about tonight are habits that I teach in my Clear Mind, Strong Body coaching program. The first one is making sure that we prioritize the strength of our digestive capacity. This is of utmost importance in the yogic and Ayurvedic systems of healing, of living, of spirituality. Our capacity to assimilate our food and convert that into quality, resilient tissue is of key importance. In Ayurvedic medicine, we have 7 different tissues, and each tissue feeds and nourishes and supplies all of the nutrients for the subsequent tissue. It starts with what we call lymph or plasma in the body. All the liquid portions of the body, the yogis refer to as rasa. Now, rasa means a lot of things. And in the Sanskrit language, the language of yoga and Ayurveda, the more definitions a word has, then the more important or the more emphasis that that word has in the system. And rasa is one of them. While rasa certainly refers to the gross anatomy in the human body, like the cerebral spinal fluid, synovial joint fluid, your lymph, your plasma, it also translates to mean melody, essence, juice. It's literally the liquid of life. It's the essence of life. And how we're able to keep those liquids in the body very clean, very fueled with the right nutrients and seasonal foods is really key to developing resilient tissue. If we don't have good lymph, we're not going to create and make good blood. If we don't have good blood, we're not going to create good muscle tissue. If the muscle tissue is not good, we're not going to create good bone tissue or nerve tissue or reproductive tissue. And a lot of that relies on our capacity to digest our food well and keep our digestion balanced. If you're having trouble with digestion, the yogis typically cleanse twice a year, once in the fall, again in the spring, to give the body a beat, give it a minute in between the shifts and seasons and allow the body to detoxify. Even if you have a healthy lifestyle and maybe you're already eating a largely plant-based diet or you already practice yoga and meditation, the modern world and modern living right now, unfortunately, involves quite a bit of environmental pollutants. And so the soil that our food is growing in, the air we breathe, the water that feeds our soil, our plants, our foods, and us receive over 4 billion metric tons of environmental waste every year. And so taking a week twice a year to simplify your diet, the yogis do typically a khichdi cleanse, which is a one pot dish of basmati rice, some mung beans, and some digestive spices and clarified butter cooked together as a mono diet for a week. Really gives the gut a break. And when the gut has a break, it has the bandwidth to do some of the deep cleansing and detoxifying in the deeper tissues of the body. And so being able to keep a really strong digestion and stoke that agni, that digestive fire, is so important. Yogis also are pretty good practicers of intermittent fasting, which is another one of the 10 habits I teach and implement in Clear Mind, Strong Body. It's tapping in again to those circadian rhythms and allowing the body the time to actually digest and assimilate the nutrients and foods that we've eaten in the previous meal. And when the yogis break that fast from dinner to morning breakfast, they always include a high quality fat. And that's the second tip and habit I'm going to give you tonight on habits of the yogis, on creating really healthy bones and joints and keeping them juicy and lubricated well into the later years. So what are some high quality fats? Well, clarified butter or ghee is known and used a lot in Ayurveda. You can also use coconut oil in your cooking. You can include avocado in your breakfast or in your morning smoothies. Um, and for those of you that do eat animal protein, then have some animal protein or a bone broth. But make sure you do, in the mornings, break your fast with a high quality fat. Bone tissue has a very strong relationship with fat tissue in the body. And the yogi's use of seasonal cleansing and intermittent fasting and eating high quality fats condition the body to burn fat for fuel. And this is what we want. We want the body to burn fat for fuel because that's where these environmental toxins dig deep into tissues. This is where the silent and systemic inflammation begins, at the heart of all of the autoimmune disorders and conditions that we're now seeing every day. It allows for a steady mind. This is why ascetics and monks would often eat only khichdi or ghee during their meditative and contemplative practices. Because when the body is burning fat for fuel, and it's a high quality fat that is provided, we have stable energy. We have sustainable energy. We don't experience those late afternoon sugar crashes that are so typical and what leads us going for that cup of coffee or that late afternoon, that 3:30 snack or treat. And so if you provide the body with the right fuel at the right time, you have this long burning source of stable fuel. And you'll be a lot less susceptible to cravings and urges later in the day because your body and its tissues have been properly fed, have been properly nourished, and the nerves have been soothed with the high quality fat that your body can digest. Oftentimes during cleanses, there's use of a common herb called triphala. It's actually an Ayurvedic formula of 3 different plants, different kinds of peppers and gooseberry that are blended together that help support colon health. And it does tend to have a drying nature. So it's best for short term use, just for a few weeks, typically during a cleanse or maybe during a particular window of constipation that you might be experiencing. And that is called, the formula is called Triphala. And it's a combination, like I said, of 3 different plants: Haritaki, Amalaki, and Bibitaki. And these each support the 3 mind-body principles in Ayurvedic medicine referred to as the doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is the space and air elements, and it has a very light and mobile and subtle and cold and drying quality to it, much like air itself. And often um, it often gets agitated or out of balance when we live lifestyles or have habits that are similarly light and mobile and subtle. What does that mean? It means if you're someone who's always on the go, or maybe you have an overpacked schedule, or maybe you have an occupation that requires you to have a lot of output of energy, whether it's physical, like my job as a massage therapist, or you're another kind of manual therapist or body worker, or also just energetically, the output of energy as well. Um, so having the support for Vata means having a routine, having a steady, stable schedule. It means eating foods that will bring the opposite qualities of air and space. Foods like root vegetables during the winter and late fall. Foods that are cooked and warm, well spiced and slightly oily are going to be foods that balance the space and air elements, which are dominant this time of year in late fall and winter. It's dominant in the later stages of life, ages 65 and up. And it's also dominant between the hours of 2 and 6 a.m. and p.m. on that 24-hour diurnal cycle. And so if we have lifestyles with a lot of this dispersing energy, it leaves us feeling very light, sometimes too light, and we're anxious, we're forgetful, we're fearful. Our sleep patterns are interrupted and we experience anxiety and insomnia. Oftentimes, the dryness in the skin and the bowels show up, and we have constipation. And so, doing a lot of these practices around grounding and stabilizing and warming and lubricating the tissues and calming and soothing the nervous system and mind are at the heart of keeping modern life at bay and keeping the aging process from accelerating. Vata is also the mind body principle that you could think of it as the body's currents. And when we have pain and when we have the memory of pain, then Vata is hyperactive. the nerves are still charged. And we'll talk more about what we can do with some somatic tracking later on tonight in reprogramming the memory of pain in the brain. Because oftentimes, when we have chronic pain, which is defined as pain that's been constant for 3 months or more, or episodic for 6 months or more, that's considered chronic pain. And oftentimes, people like myself will have experienced chronic pain, even if there is no longer or never was any biomechanical injury or wound or something going on with the tissue itself, that the tissue and structurally the body is fine, but the memory of pain exists. It's not all in your head. Well, it is in your head, but it's not your imagination. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more with some of the other techniques called somatic tracking. But moving along, understanding that that third habit is using some triphala or other herbal support in the Ayurvedic pantheon once digestion and your capacity to digest your food is balanced. We don't really look to botanicals to supplement our practices in Ayurveda until we know our gut has the capacity to access that plant and the plant's intelligence. So don't think that just taking a supplement is going to help you with your pain. It's going to aid and support what you're already doing. So make sure you have the digestion in place first. Fourth habit of the yogis is self-massage. It's a daily practice in Ayurveda to massage the skin with warmed oil every morning before you take a shower and start the day. And this is a practice that helps contain that dispersing energy of vata that I was talking about. It literally creates a seal in the energy body to keep your own life force energy from leaking out and also from anybody else's energy or emotional footprint, if you will, from sticking to you. It instead sticks to the oil and slides right off the energy body. Now, if you're not yet ready or prepared to implement an oil massage every morning in your day, this is where foam or ball rolling is very helpful. Anytime that we are bringing our attention to a particular area in our lives, we are in fact changing the direction and flow of life force energy. And so when we're thinking about something, that's the direction the prana will flow in. We say where the mind goes, prana flows. And so even if you're not using oil to massage yourself, laying down on these balls, doing some of the rocking and rolling techniques I'm going to share with you tonight are very key in helping balance the space and air elements and bring that awareness and attention from out there to in here, into your physical body again. It also helps stretch and pull and reshape that fascia and connective tissue that often is the result of or cause of strains and sprains that cause us so much pain. Another practice of the yogis is a daily movement, a daily rotation of all the major joints in the body. We call this dasha chalana in yoga. This is where we work systemically from the toes all the way up to the body and roll out the joints in a series of 8 clockwise and then 8 counterclockwise. And it's really quite simple. So I'm going to stand up and show you that exercise now before we move along and to the floor. So I'm going to point this a little down to the floor so you can see this. Feet are hips width distance apart. And for ladies or those identifying with the female sex, we're going to press the left foot back behind us and pressing the tops of the toes and tops of the foot right into the floor. That back leg is straight. And for gentlemen or those identifying with the male sex, go ahead and do the same with your right foot. And then we're just gently going to make some circles with that heel and ankle in the clockwise direction. Flipping over the toes onto the ball of the foot, and then flipping back over the toes to the top of the foot with every revolution. And these circles can be as slow or as quick as you'd like. It takes some practice. Usually the foot might travel out to the side. Just go ahead and keep it behind you for your 8 circles. And then once you finish those 8, reverse it. Go 8 the opposite way. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Go ahead and release and do the same thing on the opposite side. First, just press the top of the foot and toes into the floor behind you, opening up the front of the lower body. And then when you have your balance, go ahead and begin your 8 circles. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now reverse. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Bring the feet back together, hips width distance apart. Bend the knees. Hands can come to the thighs or knees. Keeping all 10 toes on the floor, we're going to do 8 circles with the knees in a clockwise direction. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Reverse. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Slowly roll up to stand, taking those circles to the hips now in a clockwise direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. In reverse directions. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Hi, Flacco. Say hi to everybody. Now coming to Sarpa, or the snake-like action. This is going to be some flexion and an extension of the spine. Again, a little bit of that tilting forward and back of the pelvis. Bend the knees, hands on the thighs, lift the heart, lift the tailbone and chest as you bend the knees. And on the exhale, round the back, tuck chin and tailbone as you slowly straighten the legs and roll up to stand. Doing this 8 times. Keeping a nice, smooth breath. Really feeling into each articulation of the spine. You don't have to go as low as I'm going. You can do just what feels good for you. You should feel no pain here. You might occasionally hear some clicks or cracks. And after your 8, come back up to neutral. Make sure you've got some space around you to swing your arms. Feet are going to stay hips width distance apart. Hips are going to face the front of the room, so you really want to avoid the temptation to move the entire body and the hips with you. But keep them square and facing forward as you left and right swing the arms, and maybe tapping the opposite shoulder in front. And that back hand may come and tap the opposite mid-back and kidney area. And just having some rotation here in the spine. And then release. Go ahead and let the arms hang by the sides. Bend the elbows, interlace the hands, and make some figure eights in one direction. 8 revolutions, or 8 figure eights. See if you can keep the forearms and elbows pretty stationary and avoid the urge to move the entire shoulder girdle. And then when you're finished with your 8, see if you can reverse the direction of your figure 8 and do 8 the opposite way. This is an easy 2-3 minute practice I do every morning while I'm waiting for my water in my tea kettle to boil. And release. Coming to the shoulders, forward and up, back and down 8 times. And then reverse 8 the opposite way. And release. And finally, coming to the head and neck, drawing some small circles on the wall in front of you with the tip of your nose. Again, these can be small circles. They don't have to be big. They don't have to be fast. And there certainly should be no pain. If you're feeling pain, slow down, make your circle smaller, or just simply stop. And after you've done your 8 circles in the clockwise direction, reverse it and go 8 the other way. And after your second set, go ahead and release. Open the eyes, take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Sigh out the mouth. Dasha Chalana, or the churning of the joints. 8 churns. That's the name of that practice of these joint rotations. And it's a daily practice I'm going to recommend to you to help with bone and joint health in the long haul. The 6th tip I'm going to leave you with of healthy healing habits of the yogis is the practice of sitting in silence. Now, meditation is not for everybody. It's a pretty advanced technique. And for most beginners, or even some of the intermediate experienced practitioners like myself, it can be sometimes difficult to actually get the mind to settle in for a seated meditation practice. So when we decide to make a choice for vitality, for more easeful living, we're doing exactly that. We're making a choice to schedule regular periods of silence in our lives. Even if you aren't necessarily a fan of meditation or even particularly like it, practice scheduling regular periods of silence in your day. This could be simply a practice of taking 1 meal a day in complete silence. Go into another room, eat alone, take your meal outside, maybe look at a natural view while you take in your nourishment and your food. It might mean going on a silent retreat or taking one full day to not speak. That was a favorite practice of mine when I was at Kripalu Yoga Center in Western Mass, where I did a lot of my studies. I would routinely take days of silence and wear a name tag that would say, "In loving silence," throughout the day. So people knew not to try to engage with me or have conversation with me, but that I was in this contemplative, observing space as a practice. When we give our sense organs a break, we're giving our nervous system nourishment, deep nourishment. And again, the nerves and the fat and the bone tissue are all closely related, and the health of one directly impacts the health of the others. And if we're always constantly on the go and not giving the mind that stillness, that antidote to the mobility of the mind, then we're really aging ourselves more quickly. And all of that air and all of that space is drying our tissues out more quickly. And it is speeding along the arthritic changes that naturally happen, and it's speeding along the discomfort that is so commonplace with people who aren't able to stay active and mobile and healthy in their later years. So these are the 6 tips or 6 healthy healing habits of the yogis I want to share with you tonight toward bone and joint health. These are not easy to implement in the modern life. They require good company and good teachers and coaches to keep you going when motivation is not enough, and a real commitment to choosing to live your life with more ease and being more mindful of the choices that you make on a daily basis and how to create more ease in your life. So I want you to take a few moments right now to pull out a piece of paper and pen if you don't have one ready. And I want you to complete the following sentence stems. Or in fact, before I do that, I'm going to have you make 2 columns. On the left, that column is going to read, "The things I do to create ease in my life are ... dot, dot, dot." I'm going to set a timer, and for 2 minutes, I want you to go ahead and write the responses. These can be simple bullet points, bullet pointed list, no self-editing here. Just go ahead and go with what your heart is telling you without the editing. The things I do to create ease in my life are ... boom, 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 boom. What I do to align with ease is... Take another 30 seconds to finish writing up this thought. and stop. You can always come back to this and add more later. But for now, I want to move on. Now, on the right side, or in the separate column to the right of that, I want you to title that, "What I Do to Create Stress Is dot dot dot." What I do to create stress is boom, boom, boom. Go ahead and write for 1 full minute. And this is just a practice in self-study and self-observation. There's no shaming here, but just an inventory of how we have chosen to orient ourselves on a daily basis. Fifteen more seconds. Finish writing that thought. And stop. And just take a moment to let your eyes wash over your two lists. And then after watching this video tonight, maybe keep that list out somewhere where you can see it every day and check in with it and choose what kind of day you want to have. When we are able to routinely practice these kinds of habits, these kinds of regular periods of silence and rest and rejuvenation, we're allowing the body to do the self-repair of damaged tissues. We're allowing the body to clean up the cells, to support the power of the mitochondria and give us that sustained, stable energy, that clear thinking, that stability in action and beliefs. This is where we want to operate from, and it's within reach. In fact, it is your true nature. And when we practice these habits and many others that I coach in Clear Mind, Strong Body, then you start to experience flow and you start to experience that ease in life. It doesn't mean that everything is peachy keen and zen and blissed out. It means that you're training your nervous system for the long haul. It means that when the inevitable waves of chaos in modern life rise up and crash over you, you have the capacity and the bandwidth to withstand it. Not only to withstand it, but to thrive in spite of it. That you don't get lost in the chaos. You recognize it's there. You recognize it as uncontrolled or unorganized energy. And you're able to contain that chaos from becoming your internal landscape. That's what we're talking about. And in doing so, with the right diet, with the right rest, with the right practices, we keep that rasa flowing. We keep the quality of that fascia high. And in doing so, we slow down the aging process. We turn down the volume of hyperactive nerves, and we reprogram the brain from the message that life is an emergency and that the pain signals no longer need to fire from the memory of pain, but that we're now inputting new software, new memory, new RAM, really. And I remember one of my yogi teachers, Dr. Chauhan in India, was explaining this concept to me, in that our memories in yoga are called samskar. It's a groove on the mind, a scar on the mind of our past experiences, good or bad. And some of these grooves are very deep. They're memories that we've had for a long time, or they're habits or patterns in the mind that we've had for a very long time. And the objective is not to erase them or make them go away. The experience has already happened. What we're doing here is adding new programming to the brain, that things are safe, that things are well, that things are stable. And in that practice, we're literally changing the plasticity of our brains and changing that message. We're creating new samskar, new grooves, and the more healthy, supportive, beneficial grooves we make in our choices and habits, that's what gets projected to the conscious mind instead of the old program. And that's where somatic tracking comes in. I'm going to walk you through some of that after we get down to the floor and do some rolling exercises. But before I move to the rolling exercises, while I have Flacco here next to me, I want to point out where these energy points are that I'm going to reference when we're on the balls. And this might just give you a better sense of where you should be feeling the sensations when we're talking about these energy points. Now, these marma points in the body, there are many tens of thousands of marma points in the body, and we're just going to talk about a few key ones that are directly responsible for help balancing pain signals in the nerves, as well as removing any obstruction to the subtle channels in the body that are responsible for carrying life force to specific tissues, namely bone tissue, muscle tissue, and our rasa, the lymphatic tissue. Those are the key tissues we're going to be focusing on today with the energy points that we stimulate. The first one is actually on the foot, tali hridaya. Now there's another, it's also in the palms. So I'm going to demonstrate it on the palms here. And then when we get down to the mat and we're rolling on the balls, I'll show you with my second camera where it is on the foot. A little difficult with Flacco here to get his leg up, but it's in the center, right at the ball of the foot or the ball of your palm here, where the knuckles, the first kind of knuckles meet from your fingers to your hand, and it's underneath the second phalange. So this is the spot, tali hridaya. This energy point here, both on the palm and in the foot, is responsible for the channel that carries prana itself, the prana vaha shrota. It's a main channel where life force energy flows throughout the entire body. And so you can just gently press on that and do some clockwise circles with the tip of your thumb. When we're using the massage or tennis balls, you would do the same. You would put static pressure, maybe create some small micro movements to stimulate that energy point. If at any time you feel a sharp shooting pain, numbness, or pins and needles and tingling, I want you to release the pressure. Use one of the modifications I mentioned earlier. Either move up to a larger size ball, put a padding or blanket on top, or stand up and take it to the wall so that there's less pressure. And go ahead and reposition and reapply your pressure. That's tali hridaya. There's Kurcha Shira, which is also on the ball of the foot, and the ball of the first finger or big toe on the foot, first finger or index finger on the hand. And this marma point in particular is good for the muscle tissue, the muscle channel, or the mamsavaha shrota, the channel carrying life force energy specifically to muscle tissue. Kircha shira. Another is called katika tarunya. This is right where the hip joint is. It's right where the femur bone or the ball of your hip joint meets the ischial tuberosity, which is this part of the pelvis down here by the pubic bone. And so this point right here, oops, let me not tip him over, and also in the back. So if you think it's right about the underwear, the panty line on the sides here, this is the point that I'm referring to. And that's the point that's responsible for supporting the asti vaha shrota, the channel carrying life force energy to the bone tissues themselves. Now, we don't want to be rolling right on the joint space. We want to be rolling on the actual hip bone itself. And so again, this takes some practice and some orientation to space and gravity to know where you are. And that's why I recommend getting more than one set of balls. And the alpha balls I particularly like for that reason, because they are larger and I can more safely distribute the weight when I'm applying my pressure to it. So that can be another mode of safety. Nitamba is another energy point or mama point. Nitamba is directly responsible for the channel for rasa, rasa vahasrota. Tongue twister, I know. Sanskrit can be a really fancy language, but don't let it throw you. Just know that Nitamba is located on the SI joint. Now, the sacrum is this small, not so small, I'll say, broad, flat, triangle shaped bone at the base of our spine, and it attaches to the ilium and the two pelvic bones here. Now, this is actually a ligament here and a joint space, and often people with low back pain or women who are in the later stages of pregnancy will have a malalignment of this joint. Sometimes the sacrum can actually become rotated or twisted to some extent, or sometimes it's hanging in a different, or being pulled rather, in a different rotation or pulling down toward the floor. And so sometimes that can create a bit of problems here in the low back. And so one of the techniques that I like to do is use the balls in their toes while I'm lying on the floor and position them right on the Nitamba points right here. And I'll show you some techniques on rolling around with them. Yeah. And the other point I wanted to show you is called lohitaksha. Lohitaksha is at the front of the thigh, and it's about 2 inches lateral to the symphysis pubic bone. Again, here's the pubic bone right here. And if we were to go 2 inches laterally to the thigh or thigh bone, right here is lohitaksha. This is an energy point specifically responsible for balancing the channel, carrying rasa, carrying lymph. And so this is just about the proximal third of your quad muscle, just a few inches down from the hip crease itself and 2 inches laterally. Lohitaksha. This is a point that we'll be working once we come down to the floor as well. So lots of different approaches here to address the pain that we often experience and mitigate it and keep those tissues pliable and mobile. Now, I don't mean to oversimplify things. Of course, we know how complex pain is in general, and certainly low back pain with all of its causes. And certainly having a good support system, healthy relationships, And being able to practice good mental health is at the key of our experience of chronic pain as well. Oftentimes, stress from our careers, our jobs, our relationships, our finances, or even just our general held beliefs around our overall health very much impact how that connectivity and conductivity of the nerves and the mind to the physical body and our experience of ourselves, of our movement, of our pain, and or absence of it. So I'm going to pause right there so you can take that in for a moment. It's a lot of information, I know, but these integrative practices are really at the heart of how people are living now. It's just not enough to rely on outsourcing all of your knowledge to other people, that you need to experiment with different approaches and integrate them to your life long enough and consistently enough to know whether or not it works for you. And that takes a lot of commitment, and it's a lifelong endeavor. That's why these systems are so much more than the latest fitness fad or diet trend, but they're really guides to how to live our daily lives with ease, with clarity, and a relaxed effort. It's not that we want an easy breezy life and everything is bliss and we're really dissociating from life. We know life is hard. We know there's a pulsation to the universe, and the universe also resides within our own microcosm and physiologies. And we're seeing this now, unfortunately, with all the autoimmune disorders that are so commonplace, that people's immune systems and nervous systems are shutting down, and they don't need to. We can take some steps with these habits and practices and with some simple techniques rolling on the balls to call vata home, bring that awareness and disbursement back into our bodies, nutrify and fortify the tissues that need that support, and continue with interacting with the world around us. So I'm going to take a moment to switch cameras and move on down to the floor and show you some of these techniques. So go ahead and grab your tennis balls and your totes and go and meet me on the floor. Go ahead and lie down actually you can sit with your legs crossed. We'll start there. And let me go ahead and see if I can make that camera great. So we're going to begin with some of those energy points on the bottom of the foot. So if your balls are in a sock or a tote, go ahead and take one out. And give me just one moment. I seem to have lost my video here. And now we can get that second camera back. Okay, now we should see that much better. One ball out of the tote. And again, we're going to place this on the ball of the foot, the Tali Hridaya point, right at the base of that second toe at the ball of the foot. This is where we want to apply that pressure of the ball, and you can leave the heel of the foot down on the floor. You don't have to lift it up. And once you have that position, go ahead and relax the toes and let them drape on down. And on the next exhale, I'm just going to transfer my weight from that back foot to that front foot, stacking my knee and hip over that ankle, pausing where I find the pressure that works for me. And stay right here with some static compression and nice deep breath through the nose. Activating the pranavahashrota. This point is directly associated with the heart and lungs. And if you'd like to move forward with me, you can keep that heel down and just slowly and with small movements, windshield wiper left and right, allowing that ball to roll across. Just left and right. So you can see a different angle. Left and right. Now, if this is too much weight or pressure in the foot, you could always take a seat on a chair or stool and modify the amount of pressure that you're applying onto these points. And release. Go ahead and plant that foot down and just stand in equal-footed position here and just feel the sensations and any differences between that and the other foot. Next technique is called big toe to go. This gets that second energy point I mentioned at the base of the big toe or the first finger. Similarly, you're going to roll that ball or place that ball right at the ball of the foot, base of the big toe, relaxing my toes. Another deep breath here. On the exhale, I'm transferring more weight into that front foot to my tolerance. And I could either stay right here, or while I'm applying that pressure, I might decide to lift my big toe up and then relax it back down. And lift it back up. And relax it back down. I'm still applying weight. I'm still pressing the ball of the foot down like I'm pressing on a gas pedal. I'm just peeling the toes up, getting a nice pinning of that fascia underneath the ball and stretching that fascia on the underside of the foot and big toe. And release the pressure on the ball and roll the ball down toward your big toe. So away from the heel, drawing that foot back, and then resting the ball of the foot back down onto the floor of the mat. Just the big toe, maybe the second toe is extended over that ball. Breathing right here. And then only if it feels good for you, you can take it further, transferring weight from that back foot to the front foot. Maybe that back heel lifts up. Maybe you even take that back foot and step it forward and continue the weight transfer as you lift the back heel. You find wherever you are in this range here, you might just be fine hanging out right here, and that's enough pressure and stretch for the foot. You find what works for you. Hands can be at the hips for added balance, or you can put them on a counter or desktop nearby. And breathe for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Release and rest. Dive inside and just observe any differences in sensation, contact of the feet with the floor. And then go to the other side, or other foot, I should say. Again, finding Tali Hridaya right at the base of the second toe, ball of the foot. Relaxing the toes as you start to transfer weight onto the ball. Heel stays down on the floor. And return back to your deep belly breath right here. Just allowing that static compression to activate the marma point. We're also releasing any tension along that posterior chain of connective tissue in the body. It runs from the sole of the foot, up the back of the leg, back of the body, back of the neck, all the way up the back of the head to the skull. So oftentimes just rolling our feet can relieve a lot of tension and torsional strain on that posterior chain and relieve low back pain. And once again, you can stay right here, or if you're coming with me, maybe you want to start to windshield wiper the ball of the foot left and right. Again, modulating how much weight you want to put into it, or finding a chair and sitting down. Take a nice deep breath as well, connecting breath and body, not just rolling out, but really combining and integrating subtle anatomy with gross anatomy. And now finding that second marma point at the base of the big toe, Karata Kunya. Transferring weight, static pressure first. Allow the brain to take in that information. Few breath cycles right here. And if you did so on the other side, you can maintain that pressure as you inhale, lift the big toe. And exhale, relax. Inhale, lift. And exhale, relax. Back and forth about 3 or 4 more times. The music that you're listening to is a compilation from Snatam Kaur, one of my favorite spiritual vocalists. This is an album called Mantras for Divine Grace, which I do not have copyrights too. I just simply wanted to include that in some of our contemplative work. Okay, release that, getting ready for big toe to go, rolling that ball away from the heel. Ball of the foot comes down to the floor. Big toe, maybe that second toe peels back on the ball. Returning back to breath. And deciding where on that spectrum of weight transfer you want to take this stretch into, this pin and stretch. Anytime you notice yourself holding your breath, back out of it or go to the wall. Breathing here. This has become a must-do practice, especially when I know I'm about to hit the slopes and my feet are going to be in those tight, uncomfortable ski boots for several hours a day. I cannot get away with not doing this practice. So if you like downhill skiing, but you hate the way the boots make you feel, try this sequence on your feet and then see how it feels after. And release. Go ahead and just allow a moment with equal weight in the feet. Feel the differences there. And release. Come on down to the floor. Now we're going to go for that marma point that I mentioned was right at the panty line, here on the edge. This is particularly responsible for handling channels that flow prana to the bone and muscle tissue. I'm going to keep it out of its tote and roll it just about where I think that thigh bone meets the hip bone, and roll back on with some pressure. Now, this feels pretty darn good, so I'm going to keep with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop both of my knees over to the same side the ball is on. Maybe I lift my hips and just swing them to the left. So I'm rolling that ball along the line where my underwear would be. I'm putting weight in my hands and wrists. Now, if this is not accessible to you or not comfortable for your wrists, you could also come down to your forearms. And again, pendulum the hips left and right. You might simply roll onto one side with the weight there as well, and just simply allow gravity and that static pressure on the ball to release that point. Now you might be like, Kris, I can't even get down to the floor, or if I get down to the floor, I can't get back up. No problem. You can modify, go to a larger ball. Or do this standing at the wall, which is another option. Just walk your feet about 4 to 6 inches away from the baseboard so that you can lean back and put the weight into your apparatus. So again, I'm here, and I'm just following that line with some small movements here. And then come off of that ball and go to the other side. So again, where I'm placing the ball is right at the top of the thigh bone, not on the joint itself, but just where the thigh bone is meeting the sits bone. I'm extending that leg just so I can know I'm not on the joint. I'm right where that hamstring meets the hips. And then finding the right position that works for my body, I will modulate my body position and roll right along that spot. Again, try and trace where the underwear or maybe a bathing suit line would be. And know that you're hitting that spot if you're rolling on that line. So it's really more to the sides than it is the back of the body or the booty. And release. Go ahead and take your balls, put them back into your tote. I'm going to go back to my tune-up balls, a slightly smaller version. Now with knees bent, plant the feet hips width distance apart, and you're going to lay down onto your back, and you want to place the balls toward the upper back. The space between the balls is where the vertebra should be, so you should not have the balls rolling right on the spine, but on either side of it, like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and just let the back of my head come on down to the floor. And I'm going to walk my heels in closer to my hips. Take a nice deep breath in here. And exhale. And now we're going to begin a technique that I call chugging. So instead of creating a big movement where we're rolling the balls a far distance, we're simply going to press the soles of the feet into the floor and create this micro rock on the balls, like so. This is a slighter, deeper pressure. You can keep the hips down onto the floor, or if you want to intensify the pressure sensation, go ahead and press into the floor and lift the hips just an inch or two off of the mat. Doesn't have to be terribly high. And then go ahead and return back to your chugging. And you'll feel that soft tissues start to melt and yield and sink more deeply. And go ahead and stop, lower the hips down if you took them up. Walk the feet in slightly closer. Lift the hips up just enough so you can roll the balls just an inch or two down the spine. And then go ahead and set the head and the hips back down as you walk the heels closer. And begin your chugging. So the balls are now in that top third in between the shoulder blades. This is a common area of tension, especially with the computer use and screen time. And pause the chugging for a moment. Press the feet into the mat and transfer a little bit more weight into the balls. You don't even have to lift your hips to feel that weight transfer. Just pressing the feet into the floor might be enough for you. And then I want you to inhale both arms up toward the ceiling. Take a nice deep breath in. And on the exhale, cross the right arm on top of the left and give yourself a nice big bear hug. Feel how this pulls that skin and that connective tissue away from the point pinned by the ball. Inhale, invite the breath to expand the rib cage in all directions. And just like before, if you want to turn it up a notch, go ahead and lift the hips up off of the floor. That's optional. You don't have to do that. Again, you could be standing and leaning back onto a wall, performing the same exercise without or with your chugging action. Keep a nice deep breath. And release the hips down. Inhale the arms up to the ceiling. And exhale, switch sides. Left arm crosses over the right. Find your nice big bear hug. Maybe you lift the hips back up and you return back to your chug. This is quite a deep tissue technique here. We're pinning that superficial layer of fascia and mobilizing the intermediate and deeper muscles, especially along the rhomboids and erector spinae muscles. These are two major back muscle groups that tend to become functionally weak as we focus on everything in front of us, the flexion. Go ahead and release the hips back down. Inhale the arms back up to the sky. And on the exhale, drop those shoulders back down toward the floor and see if you can squeeze the shoulder blades toward one another, literally hugging the balls in between and activating those muscles. And breathing right here as you maintain that contraction. Inhale. Maintain the contraction on the exhale. One more time, inhale. And release the contraction, exhale. Leave the arms up by the sky. Go ahead and lift the hips up just enough to roll the balls down another inch or two. And either keep the hips lifted or you can set them down on the floor. Take a nice deep breath in. And on the exhale, as if you were turning a gigantic steering wheel, maybe of a sailboat, and you're turning that wheel to the right. Inhale, comes back to neutral, hands come to 9 and 3 o'clock, or 10 and 2. And exhale, turn that wheel to the left. Really creating this torsional and shearing effect on the connective tissue as the balls pin the superficial layers in one place. And release. You can bring the hands and interlace them behind your head to support the neck. Now that the balls are getting lower, go ahead and raise the head, raise the hips, and slowly roll those balls down another inch or two further down the erector spinae. Keep the hips lifted or down, your choice. And either just allow that static pressure or begin your chugging. Again, we're not rolling directly on the vertebra. We're on either side of the spine. And release. Now at this point, when you're at the mid to lower regions of the rib cage, I like to prop myself up on my elbows and forearms at this point. It's a little easier on my head and neck, and the balls are still in good contact with my body. And then at this point, it's a bit easier for me to roll the balls continuously down to the low back until they come right up against the ilium and the pelvic crest and ridge right there. Once I come up against that, I'm going to pause right there, set my hips down, and breathe. Maybe I rock left and right, just gently transferring weight from the left to the right. We're not rolling, we're not chugging, we're just simply rocking, putting more weight on one ball and then rocking to the other. Kind of similar to that kneading action, or like a cat. Kind of pause their area before laying down. Now, working further down to Nitamba, remember on the sacrum and the SI joint. Now, lift the hips up. Maybe you use your hands to roll the balls down. You don't want to roll the balls right over that ridge. That can be pretty uncomfortable. You can roll right up against it and then go ahead and lift up and bring the balls beyond the ridge to set back down. Now at this point, I can stay on my forearms or elbows, but this is kind of straining my neck muscles at this point. So I'm actually going to straighten my elbows and come up to flat palms behind my hips. Fingers can point forward, or you can externally rotate the shoulders and point the palms away, whatever works for you. But the weight here is on the balls and on the sacrum, right there, Nitamba. And so I'm just going to hang out here. I don't even need to chug. Just the weight and the static pressure pressing the sacrum against my pelvis is creating a release of those sacroiliac ligaments and any strain or torsional pull that might be on them. Now, this can be a pretty sensitive area for most. We have a lot of nerves exiting the spine right at that flat bone, the sacrum. So if this is too much for you, again, we can modify. You can use your larger alpha balls. You can also mute the sensation of the balls that you have. Let's say you were in between the sizes and you just really couldn't use one over the other. You can take a folded towel or blanket or washcloth and just drape it over the balls to create a little dampening of that sensation as you come back and reposition on Nitamba or wherever it is that you're working on. All right, so I'm going to come a little bit more into the frame for you. And here I am. Oh, that feels so nice. Now, these balls are something I now travel with in my carry-on. Anytime I'm going for a long car drive, a long flight, a long train ride, I do not hesitate to bust these out in public and start rolling right at the gate or even in my seat on the plane. And now I'm just doing some gentle chugging, very slow. Again, the balls are not rolling. I'm literally just kind of rocking on them. And with the blanket in between, I have this nice, soft, diffuse sensation that's gentle but still firm. And if you'd like, you can continue to roll that further down to the buttocks and the glute muscles. Maybe you're sitting right up on the sits bones and just feeling the pressure and release. And then come off and release completely. And there's a lot more of the hip rolling that we can do to support any low back discomfort. Nitamba here, and then rolling further down into the glutes. We'll will do you well. Another orientation is to orient the balls vertically on either side of the pelvis and sacrum bone. And similarly, apply your weight and then maybe swing the hips left and right like a hammock. And so you're literally rolling the balls from the medial side out, getting the glutes and working a lot of those attachments that pull on the pelvis and create that discomfort in the low back. Now, we're going to turn over onto our hands and knees and work some of these points and core muscles in front of the body that also impact low back pain. Now, again, if you're working with an injury or you're recovering from surgery, check in with your doctor or your physical therapist. Make sure that your body is at a stage of healing that it's ready for these techniques, okay? Now, for the psoas muscle or the iliacus muscle here in the front of the pelvis, I certainly am going to recommend that you modify and add some padding. Typically, we'd want to warm up the belly with a larger courageous ball that is also one of the options with yoga tune-up. But we're not going to get into that today. I just really want to keep the focus on the psoas and the quadricep muscle for today. So I do want you to pad it just for some extra support. You can leave them in the tote. I'm going to go with my alpha balls, which are a little bit larger, a little more comfortable. You want to avoid rolling on the abdomen immediately after eating, right? And certainly if you're menstruating or just about to menstruate, this might not be so comfortable. So use your judgment and modify accordingly. So I have the balls underneath here. I'm going to come to my hands and knees and work my way into somewhat of a kneeling plank pose, if you will, so that when I bend my elbows and lower myself down, I'm ballparking where these balls are going to land, and that's going to be in that inner bowl of that pelvis. So I'm going to go ahead and lower on down, coming down on my forearms and elbows. And I'm allowing one of the balls in the tote to sink right into that natural concave shape of my pelvis. Now, if you're pregnant or if you have a history of an inguinal hernia, do not do this. This is just static pressure, deep belly breath, and allowing the balls to sink right in. You can stay right here. This might be enough for you. If you want to take it further, you can bend that knee, keep it at a 90-degree angle, and then just slowly, in very small movements, windshield wiper the ankle left and right as the ball is pressing onto the psoas. Now again, if you have any numbness, any tingling, any pain, or if you're feeling a very heavy and pronounced thumping, reposition, come off of the ball and try again. And release. Go ahead and plant the palms and press yourself up to hands and knees. And we'll go right to the other side here. Again, finding your balls underneath the mat and padding. Estimate where you think it'll hit the inside of the pelvis. And go ahead and shift forward into your kneeling plank pose. And slowly exhale, bending the elbows, lowering yourself on down. And give myself a moment, returning back to deep belly breath. Just let the body do its thing, absorb this information. We don't want to do any chugging in this area. I'm just simply going to stay right here with static pressure and deep breath. And if it felt good to you and you did it on the other side, you can inhale and bend that knee 90 degrees and make some small windshield wiper movements with that ankle. Allowing for more release, more flow in the pelvis. And last technique, you could keep the knee bent 90 degrees. And if you wanted to activate this pose, you on the next exhale would press the tops of the thigh and knee into the floor as if you're trying to bring that knee toward your chest, but the floor is stopping you. Keep dropping that tailbone down, protecting the low back. And feel that activation of the psoas muscle right underneath that ball. You'll feel it contract just slightly. Take a nice deep breath in here. And exhale, release the pressure, release the contraction, all technique, and gently guide yourself off of the balls. And remove your padding. Now, coming to our final marma point and roll point today, which is lohi taksha. That's the point right here in the front of the thigh, just a few inches down from the hip crease and 2 inches lateral from the pubic bone. So right here where the bicep femoris muscle attaches. Now, for this, I like to take the ball out of its tote. I'm going to return to position the ball where I think it would hit and roll back down to my belly. Now one side is lifted here under the ball and the other side is not. This could create some discomfort on your low back. If it does, you can always fold up the blanket or take a yoga block and stack it under the opposite side to create an equal pressure. Or you could simply take the other ball and put it on the other side as well. I like to do one side at a time so I can always modulate how much weight and pressure I'm putting onto the ball. Right here, I'm just propped up on my forearms and elbows. My toes are tucked. And I'm gently straightening my legs. So I'm lifting my kneecaps and thighs off of the floor and transferring that weight right onto the ball itself. And just returning back to my belly breath here and static pressure. This might be enough. You could just hang out here for 5 full breath cycles. Or if you want to apply that same pin and stretch movement that we did before, you can keep that pressure on the ball and then inhale, bend that knee, bring that heel toward the hip. And exhale, lower that foot back down. Inhale, bend. Exhale, release. Inhale, bend. Taking a slight variation, only if it feels good for you. Exhale, start to frog leg that knee out to the side And the ball is going to roll toward the inner thigh and groin. And then reverse it. Frog legging out to the side, ball rolls to the inner thigh, and straighten. Again, if this doesn't work, go stand at a wall and try it there. You might also want to use a stack of yoga blocks between the wall and the ball and your leg, just to create a little bit of space for you standing at the wall so that you can then move your leg into this frog position. That's hard to do when you're right up against the wall flesh. So find what works for you. And when you finish with that side, go to the other. Ball rolling has become a really integral and favorite part of my night hygiene routine when I'm getting ready for bed, especially after a long day of massaging or teaching yoga. So again, I'm just hanging out here, returning to my breath and letting the body download this information. Activating Lohitaksha. You might even come all the way down, resting your head on stacked forearms. And then if you did so on the other side, I'm going to pin and stretch and mobilize. Inhale, bending that knee. And exhale, straightening it. And inhale, press. And exhale, release. Back and forth a couple of times. And then pause with the knee bent if you did so on the other side. Inhale here. Exhale, drop the tailbone and activate the pose, pressing that knee into the floor as if you're trying to bring it toward your chest. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Release the contraction. Deep breath in. And if it feels right to you, exhale, frog leg the knee out to the side. Let the ball roll to the inner thigh. And then release and return. Exhale, frog leg. And return. Now don't worry if the ball shoots out of the side as you're rolling and practicing. It does take some time to get used to it. Once you finish matching sides, go ahead and remove the ball to the side and prop yourself up on your forearms and elbows like so into a Sphinx pose. And draw those shoulder blades back behind you as you press the floor away the elbows and drop that tailbone slightly down, protecting the lower back and getting more of this extension of the spine, which is so lacking in our modern worlds and lifestyles. We need more of this kind of movement in the body versus the addiction to flexing all the time that we have in our Western fitness paradigm. Nice deep breath in here. And exhale, release. Go ahead and bring the elbows wide. Stack one palm on top of the other and rest your forehead right on top of the wrists or palms. Go ahead and bend your knees 90 degrees. And this is just a gentle low back release. Go ahead and windshield wiper the ankles left and right. Just doing a good 10 minutes of rolling right before you go to bed can certainly help you sleep more deeply, more comfortably, with less interruption. And release. Go ahead and press the palms underneath your shoulders. Engage the core and belly and press up through hands and knees. And press the hips back to your heels for child's pose. You can walk the arms out in front. Lifting the elbows up off of the floor. Palms nice and flat as the arms reach forward. Back is long. Nice deep breath in through the nose. Sigh it out the mouth. 2 more times. Inhale. Exhale. Last time in breath. Go ahead and walk the hands toward your knees, sitting up on your heels and coming to a comfortable cross-legged seated position. And I will change my camera once again. How are you feeling? You should be feeling less tense. You shouldn't be sore, but you could be. Know that this is a practice that has taken me some time. It's a practice that is like any other movement approach, should be done with care and with attention and with repetition. And use your own observation to know what feels good. Let your inner intuition and your intelligence guide you. That's what it's designed to do. And start practicing some of these habits of the yogis. Start practicing earlier, lighter dinners and close the kitchen at 6 p.m. Allow there to be that fasting time in the evening while you sleep for deep cellular repair, for deep tissue regeneration. Practice eating some healthy fats at breakfast time and pay attention to how your energy and your appetite and your moods are impacted throughout the rest of the day. Vary your movement aside from the typical flexion and extension that we have in the fitness world, and incorporate movements that have you moving three-dimensionally, whether it's dancing or Pilates or yoga. These are all really great movement approaches. Tai Chi, Qigong as well. Movements where your body is including some rotation, some twists, some side bending, as well as the forward bending and the lifting up and extending. This is the kind of three-dimensional movement we need to start working into our daily lives. Even skipping has a unique impact on how those fibers of fascia and muscle tissue organize themselves. And our body is incredibly intelligent and will organize itself in a way to support your movement, however you're moving your body, good or bad. And that's how the body is going to adapt and support you. And so if you make a lot of variety in your movement, then that connective tissue is always going to be adapting with you. And as you age, as bone density changes, your energy does not. Your bone and joint health does not degenerate as quickly. You are literally slowing down the aging process and enjoying more mobility and vitality to boot, because that's what I'm about. I want you feeling great, pain free, mobile, and agile as you age. And if you are suffering from chronic pain, you want to practice your avoidances, the practices that trigger that pain. You want to practice avoiding at least until that pain is below or at a number 6 out of 10, 10 being the most painful. You have to be at about that level of pain in order to apply the somatic tracking exercise I'm going to walk you through right now. If you aren't yet there, know that there is hope, and keep practicing these habits. Keep working your physical therapy and building functional strength. Keep practicing seasonal eating and healthy eating. And if you want some guidance on what you think the next action steps should be, reach out to me. We'll set up a free Zoom strategy call, and we'll get very clear on what the next action steps for you are in the next level of your evolution. That's really what I want for you. I want you to be able to self-evaluate, to respond and take aligned action, and to be able to relinquish chronic pain and experience more ease in life. So if you are at a 6 or lower out of 10 on your pain scale, go ahead and lay down or get comfortable. You could do this seated in a chair, or you could lay down in a Shavasana pose. Maybe put a pillow underneath your knees. Make sure you're comfortable. And you're going to begin by closing the eyes and dropping back into that deep belly breath that we started with, through the nose, out the nose, with a smooth and steady rhythm. And allow a moment for gravity and the weight of your body and the bones to sink down and settle. And then I want you to begin with a body scan, bringing to your mind's eye the crown of your head. Start there. And visually scan down your body, identifying any areas of discomfort or pain. You might choose to scan only a specific area of the body with pain, or you can continue scanning down from the crown of the head. Just simply taking inventory and identifying and body mapping where the pattern is stuck in the deep groove of the mind. Once you've found that spot, I want you to keep holding that in the mind's eye as you return back and anchor back to your deep belly breath. Allow whatever sensations to arise and exist as they are without trying to change them. Anchor to the breath, but hold the space in the mind's eye. Allow the sensations to exist, but do not allow them to take charge. Anchor in your breath. Inhales and exhales until they match in length and amplitude. And the last step in the somatic tracking exercise is to send some kind and loving messages to this area of sensation. You might say something like, "You are perfectly safe," or "Thank you for your work. You may go now." Or simply, "I love you." Keep repeating these loving, supportive, beneficial programs to the nervous system. Stay anchored in breath. Allow the sensations to exist. And download the new loving program that all is well. You are safe now. Thank you for your work. You may go now. I love you. You are safe. You are stable. You are strong, healthy, lean, and resilient. And then imagine a nice bright white light surrounding that area of sensation, burning out impurities, negative thinking, sabotaging thoughts, stagnation. And let that light radiate from that point out to the rest of your body, traveling along the limbs, swirling around the pelvis and low back, flushing out the spine, and traveling up to the third eye, the seat of intuition, foresight, clarity, and vision. Your body is full of light. And gradually, this light begins to recede and retreat back around the heart space, where it slowly shrinks back down into a slow glowing ember, like a shiny diamond sparkling in the heart. Mind, body, and soul integrated, safe, supported. Bring the hands into a prayer position in front of the heart, an Anjali Mudra, hand symbol of humility, gratitude, and respect. Go ahead and bring the thumbs up to the third eye as you drop the chin down in reverence and respect for the lineage of teachers and wisdom before us, for passing down this knowledge. Om Shanti Peace. Namaste. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you found some of these rolling techniques, some of the somatic tracking, and even some of the gentle reminders around getting adequate rest and sleep, and really allowing the body to digest not just our food, but all of our experiences in life. And if you're looking for help on the next steps to do that, please reach out to me at rasa-yana.com and message me for a strategy session. And I will follow up with a link to my calendar, and we'll have a 45-minute complimentary laser coaching session to get to the heart of what's getting in the way of your next up leveling in your life, and how some of these habits and practices from the Vedic systems, yoga and Ayurveda, can help you. Hope you're well and stay in touch.